So as a player, I'm also a tinkerer. I've been repairing and modifying my own guitars ever since I got started, and this one was no exception. So shortly after I got it, I started tearing this thing apart, changing the knobs, changing the pickups. At one point I installed a kill switch button. Again, this was Guitar Hero times, Buckethead was all the rage. I was playing this and I was just seeing like what little things can I do to modify this guitar, and it went through so many different changes. And at one point I had a Vibrola tremolo arm on here, as you can see from these holes in the body. Speaking of modifying guitars, I want to give a big shout out to my new friends over at Guyker who sent me this new tremolo unit that we're going to install on our SG today. For sending me this product to test out, demo, and review. Let's install this part on the SG and see how it performs. We have our SG and we are going to be installing this Vibrola style tremolo unit on here. Now, if you look really close, you can see there's a few holes in the body which correspond to one of these units that I put on a long time ago. But unfortunately, the part that I got was also a third-party manufacturer and it wasn't as high quality. So we're really hoping that this piece that Guyker sent over is going to be nice and is going to work for what we're doing. So we're going to take this cover off of here. There are 4 little screws that hold that onto the frame. We're going to take those off. And then underneath here, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws that are going to mount this frame right under the top of the guitar. The ball end of the strings is going to go into these little retainer notches here, and that's what's gonna hold the strings in place. And then basically the way this works is this little bent piece of metal here, we're just bending it. And when we bend it with the arm, it's gonna rock these forward and back, and that is going to create our tremolo effect. Let's get started. The first thing we have to do is take the strings off. I'm gonna save the high and the low E strings so that we can line these up in the slots and make sure that our alignment is good before we drill any new holes. Because spoiler alert, the last time I installed one of these, I think I was 17 and obviously didn't know what I was doing. So it's very likely these holes that are already here were not drilled in the correct place. So let's get these strings off of here. Okay, so we have our old tailpiece off here. Right now I need to take out the old tailpiece studs, and these just unscrew. So we have our studs out. Let's take a look and see what this looks like on here. Pretty sweet. You'll see that we're still gonna see our exposed tailpiece stud anchors here, but I'm not too worried about that. So now the next thing we have to do is take these 4 little screws off of the plate cover here and get this thing lined up and get ready to drill. Okay, so I ditched the plan of lining up the strings here in favor of doing it the right way and measuring things out. I have measured the center line of the fretboard here. I've measured the center line in between the 2 tailpiece studs, and I've run a line all the way down to the bottom of the body here. I didn't want to line this up to where the end pin hole is because I've heard that from the factory, Gibson usually doesn't center those on the guitars, and I didn't want to risk having this thing be crooked. I also measured where the end of the frame needed to be on the guitar so I could line everything up. I placed this back on here. You can see my tape with the center lines on the frame itself. Lined it up with all of my lines that I measured out very, very carefully, and I punched some holes using an awl. I have some tiny new holes next to the old holes, and surprise, surprise, I did get the measurement wrong the first time, so whoops. Anyway, time to drill. Okay, we have this position and everything looks like it lined up really, really nicely. Okay, so there's one last thing we need to do before we put this all together, and that's to ground the strings to all the hardware. Traditionally, when Gibson does this, they'll run a little wire from the back of one of the potentiometers and attach it to the tailpiece anchor stud. But since these technically aren't really connected to anything anymore, they're underneath where our tailpiece is gonna sit, what we're gonna wanna do is do the same thing and just drill a very tiny hole from the pickup route into the bridge anchor stud. And so the thought process is we're grounding the hardware to all the electronics, so we're not gonna have any buzzing. So what I'm gonna do now is just drill a very, very tiny hole right here into this hole that the bridge post anchor is mounted. And then we're gonna run this just a very, very small wire up through here where the pickup wires come out into this area, and then there's gonna be bare wire making contact with that anchor. Okay, so we have our wire placed. You can see there's just a tiny little wire, and I've got the bare end exposed, and it's touching this bridge anchor post. So it's making contact with that, and now we're gonna route this into the control cavity, And we're just gonna solder this onto the back of one of the pots, and we should be good to go. All right, frame is installed. Now we just gotta put the cover back on. And we have these 4 little screws that we have to attach. And then we should be able to restring it and set it up. Okay, well, you know what they say, the proof is in the pudding. Damn, what a fun guitar. I love playing this thing, man. And I love the tremolo unit. I think this turned out really nice. The look of these is great. It's so classic. They put these on a lot of the 60s and 70s SGs. So along with just the worn look of the finish, I think this helps make it look even more like a vintage guitar. I also love the functionality of having a tremolo bar. And you could think of these not so much like a Floyd Rose. I mean, you're not doing too many dive bombs with something like this, but as like a Bigsby, or, you know, something that just kind of gives you a nice little shimmer effect. They're a lot of fun to play with. One of the other nice benefits of one of these tailpieces is it adds a lot of mass to the guitar. So we add a little bit of weight to the body, which helps correct one of the problems that SGs are unfortunately known for, which is neck dive. So it helps the balance a lot, it looks great, the functionality is pretty great. Some people complain that these give SGs a little bit of tuning stability issues, but this one in particular seems to be working fine. I haven't been having too many tuning stability issues since I installed this, and I like it a lot. It's a lot of fun to play with. So for years, I worked in a guitar store. Constantly, over and over and over again, I would have parents coming in, or even adults who wanted to start learning how to play guitar. People who were buying their first guitar, and they would always ask me, what do you recommend? What's the best guitar to get for a beginner? My response has always been the same. Just get the best guitar you can. And if that means buying used, then great, more power to you. You can get a great deal on a used guitar, and there's plenty of resources out there to find a really high quality used guitar. One of the benefits to going to a guitar store is being able to sit down and try out a bunch of them and figure out which one you like, but you will always be more inspired and motivated to stick with it and keep playing if you get yourself a good instrument right out of the gate.